Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? The room buzzed with low laughter, the scrape of boots, the shuffle of paper maps. Sunlight spilled through the narrow blinds, stripping the long table where officers outlined the day's patrol. She sat there, hands folded, posture straight, her face unreadable. Her name was Sergeant Emma Mitchell. To most of the men in that room, she was no one special, just a driver, a warm body behind the wheel of a Humvee. Mitchell, the lieutenant's voice cut sharp across the table, you'll drive the third vehicle. Support only. Stay behind the line if we encounter any hostiles. His tone was final, almost dismissive. Yes, sir, she replied, voice level. Not a flicker of defiance. Not a hint of the storm that twisted quietly beneath her ribs. Captain Reynolds smirked, leaning back in his chair with the casual arrogance of someone who thought he had the world figured out. Try not to scratch the paint this time, Mitchell. Some of us actually went through combat training. The room erupted in chuckles. Shoulders shook. Heads nodded. For them, it was just another jab at the quiet sergeant who rarely spoke up, who never pushed back. Emma's expression didn't change. Her knuckles did, tightening slightly around the thin sheet of orders in her hand. She'd heard worse before, far worse. 5 years of being treated like background noise had taught her patience. Silence. The art of letting men underestimate you. Her mind flickered uninvited to a memory. Another briefing room, another life. Harsh lights, elite instructors, voices that demanded perfection from every movement, every breath. Back then, her opinion had mattered. Back then, her voice carried weight. That was a lifetime ago. Convoy rolls out at 600, dismissed. The chairs screeched back, boots stomped. Laughter carried through the hallway as men slapped each other's shoulders, cracked jokes about heat, about boredom, about the milk run ahead. Emma rose without a word, walking with precise steps toward the motor pool. No wasted motion. No hesitation. She had a job, and she would do it better than anyone else here, whether they noticed or not. The Humvee sat waiting, its tan paint dulled by dust, its frame streaked with the history of 100 patrols. Emma's eyes swept across it with the gaze of someone who saw more than metal. Fluid levels, tire wear, communication lines, armor panels, every check made not because she was told but because she knew. What are you doing, Mitchell? It's just a milk run. Specialist Cooper's voice carried lazy amusement as he leaned against the hood of his own vehicle, rifle slung carelessly. Standard procedure, sir, she answered automatically, eyes not leaving her work. The same answer she'd given 100 times, the same shield she always raised. Her fingers moved over the Humvee's interior like a pianist across ivory keys. Every dial adjusted, every mirror aligned, every weapon mount confirmed. She knew this machine like a second skin, knew it well enough to trust it when men wouldn't trust her. By the time the convoy assembled, the desert sun had started its slow climb. 6 vehicles lined in neat formation. 20 soldiers checked weapons, adjusted gear, squinted at the horizon. Emma slid behind the wheel, her movements efficient, controlled. Her passengers, 3 young soldiers fresh out of basic, fidgeted nervously in the back. First patrol, she asked without looking at them. A hesitant voice answered, yes, ma'am. Her green eyes flicked to the mirror, studying their pale, uncertain faces. Without a word, she reached back, checked each weapon herself, adjusting safeties, seating magazines. Their surprise was immediate. Their embarrassment was obvious. Just because I drive doesn't mean I don't know protocol, she said flatly. Out here, protocol keeps you breathing. The boys swallowed their protests. The engine rumbled to life. Dust rose in great billowing clouds as the convoy rolled out the gates, cutting across the scrubby terrain. Emma's eyes never stopped moving, mirrors, horizon, convoy spacing the road ahead, a silent metronome of vigilance. Something felt wrong. She couldn't say why. A subtle shift in the air, maybe. An unnatural quiet where there should have been movement. A road too empty. Comms check, all vehicles. Lieutenant Parker's voice crackled over the radio. Each vehicle responded in turn, their voices clipped mechanical. When it was her turn, Emma spoke more than required. Vehicle 3, clear comms, visibility good, noting unusual lack of civilian traffic on Route Bravo. The silence that followed pressed against her earpiece, heavy, tense. Finally Parker's voice cut back in, sharper now. Just drive, Mitchell. But her gut twisted, something was off. 20 minutes later, the convoy entered the narrow pass. Rock ridges rose on either side, shadows stretching long across the road. Perfect territory. Too perfect. Emma's hands tightened on the wheel. Vehicle 3, maintain distance, came the order. She didn't answer. She was already dropping back, creating space. Her passengers shifted, confused. Why are we? One began. The world exploded. The lead vehicle vanished in a blast of fire and steel. A wave of pressure slammed Emma's Humvee, rattling her bones. The windshield cracked, dust and smoke choking the air. Contact left, contact left, the radio screamed before dissolving into static. Emma's hands moved before thought. Brakes slammed, vehicle angled for cover. Her voice cut through chaos like steel. Out, cover behind the engine block. The young soldier stared, frozen. Move, she barked, eyes burning with authority that had never once been seen from her. They obeyed instantly, diving behind the armored frame as bullets pinged against metal. Through the smoke she saw him. Major Richards, the convoy commander, lying 30 yards out, thrown by the blast, blood pooling beneath his leg. Between him and safety stretched a kill zone alive with gunfire. Someone shouted into the radio, "The major's down." "Hold positions, wait for air support." Parker's voice came back, strained, uncertain. Emma's jaw tightened. 15 minutes for air support. The major didn't have 15 minutes, not with a wound like that. 2 soldiers tried to reach him, cut down instantly by withering fire. One screamed as a bullet tore through his shoulder, dragged back by his comrade. Panic rippled through the formation. Emma's mind shifted gears. No more driver, no more cover. The mask slipped, and what lay beneath was something no one here had ever seen. U-3 covering fire West Ridge. Controlled bursts, don't waste ammo. But the lieutenant said, one began. The lieutenant isn't watching our co bleed out, she snapped. Fire when I move. And then she was gone, sliding across the hood of her Humvee, low and fast, rolling into the dirt behind a stone outcrop. Movement smooth, efficient, perfect. Mitchell, get back to your vehicle. That's an order. Parker's voice cracked through the radio. She ignored him. She was counting, timing the rhythm of fire, 3 seconds between volleys. 1, 2, 3, move. She burst forward, sprinting 10 yards before dropping behind burning debris. Smoke stung her lungs. Bullets stitched the dirt where she'd been a heartbeat earlier. Her passengers opened fire as ordered, drawing enemy attention. The firefight faltered just enough. Another sprint, another cover, 20 yards now. Richard's face pale, eyes fluttering, blood seeping into the dirt. Femoral artery, her mind calculated. Minutes, not hours. Parker was still shouting, still clinging to authority he couldn't control. Soldiers looked to him, then to her, and when she spoke again, they obeyed her, not him. Because her voice wasn't guessing, it was certain, it was trained. Her jacket came off, tossed aside for freedom of movement. She zigzagged across open ground, bullets chasing but never catching her. Soldiers stared in shock as their just a driver moved like a ghost across the kill zone. She slid to Richard's side, dirt burning against her arms. Bullets whined overhead. Calmly she spoke, "Stay with me, Major." His eyes cracked open, fogged with pain. "Mitchell, you're saving your life, sir. Try not to move." Tourniquet out, applied with flawless precision. Blood flow slowed, morphine in, gauze packed. Her hands moved with the certainty of someone who had done this before in places far darker than this. From cover, Specialist Rodriguez froze. His eyes caught the scar running the length of Emma's arm where her sleeve had torn. Not an accident scar, not random, the kind only special operators carried. "Special operations," he whispered. Emma didn't look at him, didn't answer, just worked, just saved. Because out here titles didn't matter, orders didn't matter, lives did. And she had carried that creed long before anyone in this convoy ever knew her name. How far would she go against orders to save one man's life? Gunfire still tore through the valley. Shouts, the echo of ricochets, the steady crack of rifles from unseen ridgelines. Emma knelt beside Major Richards, her hands already bloodied. The makeshift tourniquet slowed the worst of the bleeding, but his face was pale, his breath shallow. He didn't have long. "Cover East Ridge," Emma shouted, her voice sharp, commanding. Soldiers nearby hesitated, eyes flicking to Lieutenant Parker for confirmation. He froze, torn between pride and survival. Emma didn't wait. She shifted her body over Richards, shielding him as dirt sprayed from a near impact. Her voice rang again, stronger now, the kind that didn't ask for permission, it expected obedience. "Suppressive fire East Ridge now." And they obeyed, instinctively, because her words carried something Parker's didn't, certainty. He stumbled toward her position, crouched low, rage etched into his face. "Mitchell, you're undermining my command. Fall back, that's a direct order." Her green eyes snapped up, calm even as her hands pressed gauze into Richard's wounds. "With respect, sir, your current plan will get him killed." Parker faltered. Around them, men watched, listening. His grip on authority slipped with every second she ignored him. "Rodriguez," Emma called, never breaking her rhythm, "smoke grenades, now." The specialist blinked, then fumbled at his belt. "Ma'am." That wasn't a request. Something in her tone, low and sharp as glass, cut through hesitation. He handed them over. "Mitchell," Parker barked again, but his voice lacked weight now. Soldiers were moving with her cadence, not his. Emma rose slightly, scanning the ridge through smoke and fire. Her mind broke the scene into pieces. Firing angles, wind direction, enemy rhythm. She primed the first grenade, her motions fluid as if she'd done this 1,000 times. "Suppressive fire on my mark," she shouted, arm cocking back. The soldiers tightened grips on their rifles, eyes locked on her. Even Parker's orders went silent. The grenade landed with surgical precision. A wall of white smoke billowed, curling across the kill zone. "Now!" Gunfire thundered. Men poured rounds into enemy positions as Emma pulled the second pin and launched the next grenade farther downrange. More cover, more concealment. She dropped beside Richards, fingers brushing his wrist for a pulse. Still weak, still fatting. "You're going home, sir," she whispered. To the three youngest soldiers, her passengers earlier, still wide-eyed, her words cut like steel. "Stretcher him. Vehicle 5, stay in the smoke, do not stop." They hesitated only a second before moving. Fear melted into purpose. They'd follow her into hell now. "Mitchell, enough," Parker shouted, scrambling after her. His face was red, his words desperate. "You're out of line." She looked up at him then, calm, unflinching. "And you're out of time." Richards was hoisted up, his body jolting with pain, but the tourniquet held. The boys ran, staggering under the weight, swallowed by smoke as Emma covered them with precise bursts from her sidearm. Rodriguez ducked beside her, firing short, controlled bursts. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" Emma's magazine clicked empty. She reloaded with smooth, mechanical efficiency. "Not in transportation school." For the first time, Rodriguez truly saw her, not as the quiet driver but as something else. Something trained, something dangerous. And then her sleeve tore wider as she pressed against jagged metal for cover. The tattoo revealed itself in fragments. Wings, a dagger, lines of ink she had kept hidden for 5 long years. Rodriguez's breath caught. "That's a PJ mark." His voice dropped to awe. "Pararescue." Emma's jaw tightened, She didn't answer. Because silence was safer than truth. The firefight intensified. Enemy volleys hammered harder now, desperate to break their formation. Soldiers returned fire, but ammo was dwindling. Fear rippled through the ranks. Emma saw it, felt it. Panic spread fast, it killed faster. "All units," she barked into the radio, her tone sharper than a blade. "Concentrate fire East Ridge, Sector 2. Suppressive fire only. Conserve ammo." Static, then responses, clear, obedient. Parker stared at her, dumbstruck. She wasn't just taking command, she was commanding like someone born to it. His voice rose, half panic, half fury. "You're undermining me in front of my men." Emma didn't look at him. She fired again, dropping an enemy fighter with surgical precision. "I'm trying to save them." And in that moment, the soldiers knew. Her voice carried weight, theirs didn't. Her movements, her choices, they weren't guesses. They were the reflexes of someone who had been here before, too many times before. The firefight ground on. She directed fire like a conductor with an orchestra, adjusting angles, shifting suppression, anticipating flanks before they formed. Every move made sense. Every call bought them another breath of survival. Rodriguez crept closer, speaking low so only she could hear. "Those comm codes you're using, they're not standard. That's Joint Task Force." Her silence answered him. Her eyes, cold and steady, confirmed more than words ever could. "Who the hell are you?" he asked. Before she could reply, another volley tore through, forcing them lower. Emma's body shielded Richards again, her arm pressing against his side as she whispered instructions to the young soldiers, dragging him to safety. Another burst of smoke grenades, more cover, more chaos, and through it all, Emma moved like someone carved from the battlefield itself. Her scar glistened with sweat, her tattoo shone through dust and torn fabric, and her secret, the life she had buried under 5 years of silence, was clawing its way into the light. From across the kill zone, one soldier whispered what they were all thinking. Who the hell is she? What would happen if her truth refused to stay buried? The smoke curled across the battlefield like restless ghosts. Bullets hissed through it, sparking against steel, tearing into dirt. Emma crouched low, her body pressed against Major Richards as he slipped in and out of consciousness. His lips moved, faint but clear enough for her to hear. "You're not just a driver." Her jaw tightened. "Not the time, sir." But his words struck deeper than the bullets around them. Because the truth was surfacing, piece by piece, in the way she moved, in the scars etched into her skin, in the tattoo now half revealed to eyes that should never have seen it. Rodriguez was staring, not with doubt but with recognition. His gaze flicked from the ink to the precision in her voice, the steadiness in her hands. He'd served near special operations units before. He knew their signature, their invisible fingerprints. "You've been downrange," he whispered, almost reverent. "Focus on the ridge," she shot back, voice clipped, eyes hard. But silence was an answer too. The firefight thundered on. Enemy rifles spat from the ridgelines, relentless but less coordinated now. Emma's orders had shifted the tide. Suppressive fire carved breathing space where moments earlier there had been none. Soldiers who had been seconds from collapse now fought with renewed purpose. Parker crawled into position beside her, face twisted with rage and confusion. "You're not in command here, Mitchell. I am, and you will fall back to your vehicle or I'll." Her hand snapped up, pointing toward a southern approach. 3 o'clock, they're flanking. Almost as if summoned by her words, 2 figures broke from cover, sprinting low. Emma raised the rifle she'd scavenged earlier, sights aligned in an instant. 2 measured shots, 2 bodies crumpled in the dust. The field went momentarily quiet. Parker's jaw slackened. He hadn't even seen the flank forming. She had. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. Her focus stayed locked on the battlefield, her voice steady. "Your perimeter has 3 weak points, Lieutenant. If we hold here, we're dead." His pride warred with reality. His men weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. Rodriguez's voice cut through, calm but certain. She's right. Parker's hands clenched, veins bulging against his skin. But his silence told the truth. He knew he'd lost the grip. Authority had shifted. Emma's eyes never left the ridges. Consolidate around vehicles 4 and 5. Strongest cover. Stagger withdrawal in teams. Medical team first. Her radio crackled as soldiers complied. Without hesitation, without question. Parker hissed low enough so only she could hear. "Who the hell are you?" She ejected her magazine, reloaded with a smoothness that betrayed thousands of repetitions. Her answer was colder than the steel in her hands. "Right now, the person getting us home." The battle resumed, harsher now. Enemy fire thickened as if the ridges themselves spat fury. But Emma anticipated it. Adjusted fields of fire before threats even fully emerged. Called corrections like she'd walked the ridges herself, mapping every crevice. Rodriguez caught another glimpse of her tattoo when her sleeve snagged again. Wings and dagger clearer now. He froze. He'd seen that emblem before, back when he'd supported joint task forces. "That's pararescue." His voice was hushed, almost disbelieving. "That's their creed." Emma's jaw twitched. Her silence confirmed what words couldn't. The revelation spread like wildfire through the ranks. Men shouted to one another between bursts of gunfire. "She's not just transport. She's special ops. Look at her move." But Emma didn't hear them. Couldn't afford to. Her world had narrowed to Richard's labored breathing, the rhythm of enemy fire, the ticking clock in her head. Air support still minutes away. Ammo dwindling, morale hanging by a thread. Her voice cut sharp through the chaos. "Bravo team, shift fire 15 degrees north. Alpha, eyes on wreckage 10 o'clock. Movement in cover." Her soldiers, because in that moment that's what they were, responded instantly. Suppression slammed into the ridges. Enemy fire staggered, faltered. Richard stirred faintly beneath her hands. His eyes fluttered open, hazy, but focused enough to see the tattoo fully exposed now on her arm. Recognition flickered through the pain. "Mitchell, I knew you were." "Save your strength, sir." But she could see it in his gaze. He knew. And Parker, watching her with something between resentment and awe, was starting to know too. The roar of rotors echoed faintly in the distance. Air support. Relief surged, but only for a heartbeat. They weren't safe yet, not even close. Emma signaled, her voice still crisp, commanding. "Prepare landing zone. Vehicle 5, clear area 360 coverage. Rodriguez smoke on my mark." The men moved with discipline they'd never shown under Parker. They moved with hers. Parker hissed again, desperation lacing his words. "This isn't possible. Women don't, pararescue doesn't." Emma's gaze cut to him, sharp as a blade. "Times change, programs evolve, some just don't make headlines." For a moment the battlefield fell away. And in Parker's eyes she saw it. The crumbling of everything he thought he knew about her, about command, about who deserved respect. Then gunfire erupted again, dragging them back to reality. The helicopter thundered in low, rotors chopping the smoke into chaos. Emma directed fire, adjusted perimeters, secured Richards for loading. Her tattoo gleamed stark and undeniable now, dagger through wings, creed etched beneath. Rodriguez's voice broke the heavy air. "These things we do, that others may live." Emma's lips tightened. "That others may live." The words weren't boast, they were confession. And for the first time in 5 years, she said them in the open. What happens when the mask finally shatters? The thunder of helicopter rotors churned the battlefield into a storm of dust and smoke. Soldiers scrambled, forming a defensive ring as Emma orchestrated every movement with crisp, undeniable authority. "Secure the LZ. 360 coverage, eyes on the ridges," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Men obeyed without hesitation. Even Parker, jaw clenched, pride bleeding out of him, moved where she pointed. Emma keyed her radio, her tone precise, professional. Dust off 6-4, this is ground element. LZ hot, taking fire northeast ridge. Recommend approach heading 270. We have 3 urgent surgical, 4 priority. The pilot responded instantly, voice clipped, trusting. Copy ground, coming in hot. Emma adjusted Richard's stretcher, her hands steady despite the storm. His face was pale, eyes glassy, but still fixed on her. I knew, he rasped, barely audible. His gaze flicked to her exposed forearm. To the dagger through wings, the creed etched beneath. Recognition glimmered in his pain-clouded eyes. You're one of them. Emma's jaw tightened. She pulled the stretcher straps tighter, disguising her reaction with movement. Save your strength, sir. But it was too late. Others had seen too. Rodriguez stared, eyes wide. His voice was hushed, almost reverent. That's not rumor, that's real, you're PJ. Pararescue. The word carried weight in the air. The elite combat medics of the Air Force, trained to save lives in the deadliest conditions on Earth. Parker's face twisted with disbelief. That's impossible. PJs don't, women aren't. Emma cut him off, her voice low, sharp. What, Lieutenant? Except women, except the ones who bleed and fight and save the same as you. He faltered, because his arrogance couldn't stand against the evidence. Not when she had just saved his commander's life under fire. Not when every soldier here had watched her move like no driver ever could. The wounded were loaded into the chopper, Emma moving with mechanical efficiency. Urgent surgical first, secure them tight. She lifted Richards herself, her muscles straining, her shoulder grazed, dripping blood she refused to acknowledge. The torn sleeve pulled wider, revealing the tattoo fully now. The wings and dagger, the words beneath. These things we do, that others may live. Rodriguez whispered it again, almost like a prayer. Soldiers who had once dismissed her as invisible now looked at her with awe. But Emma didn't bask in it, didn't even glance their way. She raised her rifle, scanning the ridges, covering the final loading as if her secret hadn't just burned away in front of them all. A fresh burst of enemy fire raked the landing zone. Emma dropped to a knee, sighted, and fired 3 crisp shots. Each round landed, each threat silenced. Soldiers stared. One murmured, "She's better than our instructor." "Better than anyone I've ever seen," another added. Parker swallowed. His earlier smirk and condescension turned to silence. Emma finished the last reload, then signaled, "Final chalk, move now." Rodriguez dragged a wounded soldier aboard. Cooper stumbled, clutching his bandaged arm. Emma grabbed him by the vest, shoving him onto the deck. "Go," she shouted. Only a handful of them remained outside now. Emma, Parker, Rodriguez, covering the last perimeter. And then movement, shadows in the smoke. 3 insurgents flanking the helicopter's blind spot, rifles raised. Emma saw them first, always first. "Contact rear," she shouted, already moving. Her body flowed forward, low, fast, precise. She engaged before the men even fully cleared cover. 1 shot, 2, 3, each clean, each final. When the last body hit the dirt, Emma didn't pause, didn't celebrate. She turned, scanning again, rifle steady, eyes cold. Only then did the others realize she'd taken a bullet herself, a gray streaking blood across her shoulder. She hadn't flinched, hadn't even mentioned it. The tattoo on her arm shone dark with sweat and blood now, undeniable. Parker stared, the truth settling like a stone in his gut. "You're not just any PJ, are you?" His voice cracked, part awe, part fear. "What's your actual clearance level, Mitchell?" Emma didn't look at him, didn't break focus. She just gestured toward the helicopter. "We need to move, sir." Rodriguez clambered aboard, pulling Parker after him. Emma followed last, slamming her body against the frame, securing herself as the helicopter lifted into the night sky. Dust and smoke swallowed the valley below. The battlefield shrank to nothing more than shadows and fire. Inside the chopper, Emma was already working. Hands steady, eyes sharp, rechecking vitals, stabilizing lines. She worked alongside the medic as if she'd always belonged there, because she had. The medic watched her slip an IV line with surgical precision, his voice stunned. "That's advanced field work. Where did you?" "PJs are medics first," she said simply, adjusting the drip. "This is basic training where I come from." Rodriguez stared at her, finally speaking the thought out loud. "You're not just pararescue, you're something more." Emma didn't answer. Richard stirred weakly, forcing his eyes open against the haze of morphine. He fixed on her face, then on the tattoo. His lips curled faintly, cracked with pain. "I remember now. Cairo, 3 years ago, you pulled us out. Embassy extraction, we thought no one could do it, but you were there." Emma's jaw tightened. She checked his bandage again, her voice calm. "Rest, sir, you're safe now." But Richard's hand caught her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes held hers even through the fog. "You saved 18 lives that day, including mine. You disappeared after, and now I find you here, driving trucks." His words carried weight. The medic froze. Parker's head snapped toward her. Rodriguez leaned forward, eyes burning with questions. Emma carefully freed her wrist, voice steady, controlled. "That wasn't me." But Richard's faint smile betrayed her. "Your tattoo says otherwise. Never forget the angel who brought us home." The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire had ever been. For years, Emma had lived in the shadows. For years, she had endured laughter, dismissal, invisibility, all for a mission larger than pride. But here, now, in this helicopter thick with dust and blood, her secret stood exposed. And there was no going back. What happens when survival on the battlefield collides with suspicion back at base? The helicopter's thrum still echoed in their bones when the convoy survivors staggered through the wire. Floodlights bathed the forward operating base in harsh white. Dust clung to uniforms, blood smeared every sleeve, eyes hollowed by shock. Emma walked at the rear, steady, silent. The tattoo on her arm was hidden again beneath a hastily tied field dressing, but the memory of it, what it revealed, burned in every soldier's mind. Medical teams rushed Major Richards away. His stretcher vanished under swinging doors, swallowed by the sterile brightness of the field hospital. Rodriguez followed, still shaken but alive. Parker lingered in the shadows, his face tight, words unspoken but simmering. The men who had once laughed at her now fell quiet when she passed. No more jabs, no more smirks, just silence, watching, wondering. Inside the briefing room, the air was thicker than the battlefield smoke. Colonel Hayes stood at the head of the table, jaw hard, eyes fixed on Emma. The surviving officers and squad leaders filled the room, some bandaged, others still streaked with dirt. Parker broke the silence first, his voice sharp, accusing. "She undermined command in the field, sir, ignored orders, took over the convoy, she endangered protocol. She saved the major's life." Rodriguez's voice cut clean through Parker's. He sat straighter, shoulders squared, his gaze fixed on Hayes. "Without her, we'd all be dead." Murmurs rippled across the table. Men who had seen her charge into gunfire, who had felt her certainty steady their panic, shifted in their seats. They didn't defend her openly, but the weight of their silence spoke volumes. Hayes' eyes didn't move from Emma. "Sergeant Mitchell, you're a transport operator, yes?" "Yes, sir." Her voice was steady, even. "Then how," Hayes leaned forward, voice low, dangerous, "does a driver move with the precision of special operations? How does she call suppressive fire patterns outside standard Army training? How does she carry a tattoo that doesn't exist in any personnel file?" Emma's hands remained folded on the table. Her expression didn't change. "With respect, sir, I only did what was necessary." Hayes' stare sharpened. "Necessary or trained?" Silence hung. The hum of fluorescent lights pressed in. Finally Hayes spoke again, softer but heavier. "You were supposed to stay buried." The words landed like a blow. Parker's eyes widened, confusion flashing to suspicion. Rodriguez frowned, trying to piece it together. Emma's gaze dropped for the first time. A shadow crossed her features, the kind that comes only from ghosts too heavy to name. "Sir," Parker snapped, seizing the opening. "What is she hiding? Who the hell is she really?" Hayes cut him off with a glare. "That's not your concern, Lieutenant." Parker bristled but bit back the retort. Rodriguez leaned forward, voice careful. "Sir, with all due respect, she saved us. The Major's alive because of her. We deserve to know who we were out there with." Hayes exhaled, the sound weary. His eyes flicked to Emma, then back to the room. "What you need to know is that Sergeant Mitchell is under my command. Her past is not open for discussion. What matters is the mission. And right now, the mission is survival." The room buzzed with unease. Questions swirled unspoken, eyes darted, but no one challenged further. Hayes dismissed them. One by one, chairs scraped, boots echoed. Parker stormed out first, jaw tight. Rodriguez lingered, eyes catching Emma's. His look wasn't suspicion, it was curiosity, respect, but also the unshakable hunger for answers. When the room emptied, Hayes remained. Emma didn't move. Finally, he spoke. "You weren't supposed to draw attention. Not here, not now." Emma's voice was low, flat. "You put me in the field. You knew it could happen." "I put you where no one would look." Hayes' tone carried both anger and something else, regret. "You were supposed to fade, drive trucks, blend into background, not expose yourself to half a platoon." Emma's eyes hardened. "I wasn't going to let Richards die." Hayes' jaw flexed. He studied her for a long moment, then leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you know what happens if your past becomes rumor? If the wrong ears catch wind that you're still active, they'll come for you. Not insurgents, not rival forces, our own." Emma's silence was answer enough. She already knew. Hayes exhaled, his shoulders heavy. "You have enemies on both sides, Mitchell. Don't make them remember you." She rose slowly, her posture sharp. "Then don't put me where men bleed in front of me and expect me to do nothing." For the first time, Hayes' stern mask cracked. Something flickered across his face, pride, maybe, or grief. "You're the last one left," he said quietly. Emma froze. His words echoed like a bell in her chest. The last one left. Images surged, faces, voices, laughter in dim barracks. Her old unit, her family in uniform. Ghosts swallowed by silence, by missions never recorded. She pushed them down the way she always did. Without another word, she turned and left. Outside, the base was restless. Whispers spread through the barracks like smoke. The driver who wasn't just a driver, the scar, the tattoo, the impossible skill. Rodriguez found her near the motor pool, hands buried in grease as she checked over the Humvee again, as if the battle hadn't happened. "You ever gonna tell us who you really are?" he asked softly. Her hands stilled, but she didn't look up. "I'm the one who gets you home alive. That's all you need to know." Rodriguez studied her, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough, but know this, whatever past you're running from, today you gave us hope." Emma's jaw clenched. Hope. The word cut deeper than any bullet. As night settled over the desert, she sat alone in the quiet hum of the motor pool. The grease on her hands, the ache in her muscles, the ghosts in her chest. And somewhere deep inside, a truth she could no longer bury. Her past wasn't gone. It was awake. And sooner or later it would demand its price. What happens when whispers turn into shadows that follow you? The desert night lay heavy over the base. Searchlights swept the wire, humming generators filled the silence, and soldiers moved in quiet pairs, their boots scuffing dust. But inside Emma's quarters it was too still, too quiet. She sat on her cot, boots still on, uniform half-stripped, eyes fixed on the wall. Sleep wouldn't come. Not after the firefight, not after Hayes' words. The last one left. Her fingers traced the edge of her bandage, where blood had dried stiff against the sleeve. Beneath it, the tattoo pulsed like a brand, dagger through wings, the creed beneath. A mark she had once worn with pride. A mark she now kept hidden like a wound. Outside her door, two voices drifted through the thin walls. Parker and another lieutenant, low, sharp. Saw the ink myself. That wasn't standard army. Hayes shut us down, means it's bigger than us. Or she's lying, playing us. Emma's jaw tightened. She closed her eyes, listening to the boots fade. She didn't need sleep. She needed control, because once suspicion took root, it spread fast. By morning, the base buzzed with whispers. Soldiers who had once ignored her now stared too long, then looked away when she met their eyes. Rodriguez stayed close, loyal in his silence, but Parker's gaze followed like a shadow, always watching, always calculating. At chow, the tension sharpened. Parker dropped his tray across from her, the slam of it drawing eyes. His voice was calm, but his smirk was back, poisonous. You know, Mitchell, people are starting to wonder how a driver shoots cleaner than most infantry, how a driver patches wounds like a surgeon, how a driver just happens to have the exact tattoo of an elite unit the Pentagon doesn't officially admit exists. Emma's fork stilled. She raised her eyes, calm, steady. Eat your food, Lieutenant. Parker leaned in, voice low. I will, but know this, I'll find out who you really are, and when I do, I'll make sure everyone else knows too. Rodriguez shifted beside her, jaw tight. You think threatening her makes you a leader? Parker didn't look at him, didn't need to. His eyes stayed locked on Emma's. Truth has a way of surfacing. You can't bury it forever. Emma's voice was soft when she finally answered. Some truths should stay buried. Parker smirked, pushing back from the table. We'll see. The mess hall's noise swallowed him as he left, but the weight of his words lingered. Later, the colonel called her into his office. Hayes stood at the window, staring out at the endless desert. When he turned, his face was harder than stone. You're becoming a liability, he said without preamble. Emma stood at attention, jaw clenched. I didn't ask for exposure, sir. You think that matters? His voice cracked sharp. You think Washington cares about your intentions? The second they get wind of you, they'll come with questions, files, orders. Emma's silence was heavy. Hayes paced, the weight of his years showing. Do you understand what it means that you're the last, the only one left? You carry the weight of an entire program they buried. They'll do anything to keep that grave sealed. Her throat tightened. She forced her voice steady. Then why keep me here? Why put me in the field at all? Hayes' eyes softened just a fraction. Because I thought maybe you could still do good, quietly, without the noise, without the ghosts. Emma looked away, her chest tightening. Hayes' tone hardened again. But Parker's digging. Others will follow. You can't afford mistakes, Mitchell. You can't afford to care. She snapped back, sharper than intended. I cared yesterday, and it saved the major. The words hung, raw, heavy. Hayes' face flickered, pride and fear warring behind his eyes. Finally, he dismissed her with a wave. Get out before I forget why I still protect you. She left, her heart pounding. Protect her, or control her. That night she walked the motor pool, hands running along steel frames of parked vehicles. Machines didn't question, machines didn't whisper, but even here she felt the weight of eyes, watching, waiting. Rodriguez found her there, quiet as always. He leaned against a Humvee, studying her. You ever gonna tell me? Tell you what? Who you really are. His voice wasn't sharp like Parker's, it was softer, patient. Emma sighed, leaning back against cold steel. Once I was someone who believed in saving people no matter the cost. Once I was part of something that wasn't supposed to exist. And then it all burned. They buried us. Buried me. Rodriguez studied her face, the lines carved deep by things unsaid. And now? She looked at him, her eyes tired but fierce. Now I'm just trying to live with ghosts. He nodded slowly, no judgment, only understanding. Ghosts don't scare me, but lies do. Don't let Parker define your truth before you do." Emma didn't answer. Couldn't. She just turned back to the line of silent machines, the only steady thing in a world unraveling. In the days that followed, the missions continued. Convoys rolled, patrols trudged, the desert stretched endless. But the air around Emma thickened. Every word she spoke carried weight now. Every movement drew stares, some respectful, some suspicious. And Parker's eyes never left her. One evening, returning from a patrol, Emma found her quarters searched. Papers scattered, footlocker open, bandages ripped aside. Her breath slowed, her fists tightened. Only one man bold enough to do this. She closed the locker, restacked the papers, then sat on the cot waiting. When Parker finally stepped through the door, smugness dripping from his posture, she didn't rise. She didn't flinch. "Looking for something?" she asked softly. Parker smirked. "Just confirmation. You hide it well, Mitchell, but not well enough. I'll find it. And when I do, no colonel in this world will be able to shield you." Her eyes met his, calm but burning. "Be careful what you dig for, Lieutenant. Some graves bite back." For the first time, Parker's smirk faltered, only slightly, but enough. Emma leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think you want the truth. You don't. Because once you uncover it, you'll never sleep the same again." Parker's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He turned, leaving with the sharp slam of the door. Emma exhaled slowly, staring at the floor. Her secret wasn't just slipping, it was unraveling. And in the unraveling, danger was waking. What happens when the threat doesn't come from outside the wire, but from within? The desert was quiet that morning, too quiet. The convoy rolled slow across hard-packed dirt, 6 vehicles strung in a line like beads on a frayed string. Dust curled around them, swallowing sound, blurring distance. Emma's hands gripped the wheel of her Humvee, her eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. The silence felt wrong, not empty, waiting. Rodriguez shifted beside her, his voice low. "You feel that?" She nodded once. "Something's off." And she was right. The first explosion didn't hit the lead vehicle. It didn't slam the column from the flanks. It struck dead center, Vehicle 3, the one Emma should have been driving. The fireball tore into the sky, flipping the Humvee like a child's toy. Shrapnel screamed, soldiers dove, comms erupted in panic. "Ambush, ambush, contact east." Emma jerked her own Humvee into cover, dust blinding her view. Her pulse hammered, but not from surprise, from the precision. The strike hadn't been random, it had been surgical. Someone knew their exact formation. Someone knew she had been rotated out of Vehicle 3 only hours before. Someone had given them up. Bullets shredded the ridge. Emma slammed into action, barking orders, pulling her passengers into cover, returning fire with ruthless efficiency. But even as she moved, her mind raced. This wasn't just insurgents. This was information, inside information. And that meant one thing. There was a mole. The firefight dragged on, brutal, suffocating. They clawed their way out with grit and sheer survival instinct, air support finally hammering the ridges until silence fell heavy again. But the cost was carved deep. 2 dead, 5 wounded, another convoy reduced to smoldering wreckage. Back at base, tension snapped like a wire. Soldiers argued, accusations flared, and whispers thickened like smoke. The ambush had been too clean, too precise. Someone had betrayed them. And in the center of it all stood Emma. Rodriguez found her near the med tent, her face set like stone. "That was aimed at you," he said flatly. Her jaw tightened, she didn't answer. "You weren't in that vehicle because you switched last minute. Someone knew your routine. Someone wanted you gone." Emma's eyes lifted, scanning the yard. Parker stood across the way, his gaze locked on her, his mouth curled in that faint, poisonous smirk. Rodriguez followed her eyes, then swore under his breath, "You think it's him?" Emma shook her head slow. "I think he's reckless, arrogant, but treason, that's another weight altogether. Rodriguez frowned. Then who? Her silence spoke volumes. Later, the officers gathered in the briefing room. The air was sharp with tension. Colonel Hayes paced the front, eyes hard, jaw tight. "There's a leak," he said flatly. "The ambush proves it. Someone is feeding our positions." Murmurs rippled. Parker slammed a hand on the table, seizing the moment. "It's her. It has to be. She's the one who doesn't belong. She's the one hiding who she really is." Emma didn't flinch, didn't rise. She sat steady, her gaze locked on Hayes. Rodriguez's voice cut sharp. "She's the one who kept us alive out there. Don't twist the facts, Parker." Parker's sneer deepened. "Or maybe that's the perfect cover. She stages heroics, earns trust while slipping intel the other way." The room buzzed, unease thickening. Eyes darted, doubt spread. Hayes silenced them with a raised hand. His eyes, however, lingered on Emma. Long, heavy. "Enough. Until proven, no one here accuses anyone. Dismissed." But the suspicion didn't fade when the soldiers filed out. It only deepened. That night, Emma sat alone in the motor pool, the silence pressing like a vice. Her hands moved over the Humvee's frame, but her mind was elsewhere. The mole, the betrayal, the truth that every whisper pointed at her. Her past was already heavy enough. Now, with one stroke, it was being twisted into guilt. Footsteps echoed behind her. Parker again. She didn't turn. "You know what they're saying," he drawled. "That you're the reason we keep walking into perfect traps. That you're not just a liar, Mitchell, you're a traitor." Emma's hand stilled on the wrench. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "Careful, Lieutenant, you mistake your suspicions for proof." Parker circled closer, leaning against the hood, smirk curling. "Proof will come. Secrets don't stay buried. And when it does, I'll be the one who finally rips off your mask." She looked at him then, eyes steady, burning. "You think the truth will make you powerful, but you don't understand. Once it's out, it will burn us all." For a heartbeat, Parker faltered, just a flicker. Then the smirk returned. He turned and walked away, leaving the air colder in his wake. Emma exhaled slowly, pressing her palm against the steel. She was caught in a noose, between the mole outside and the suspicion inside. Between a past she couldn't confess and a present twisting against her. And deep down she knew soon she'd have to choose, silence or truth. What happens when the truth finally refuses to stay hidden? The night air was sharp, brittle with silence. Floodlights swept across the perimeter, but inside the base, shadows clung to every corner. Emma sat alone in the motor pool, her rifle across her knees, her eyes fixed on nothing. The ambush still replayed in her head, the fireball, the screams, the chaos. It hadn't been random. Someone had fed the enemy their exact route, and every whisper since had circled back to her. The driver who wasn't just a driver, the scar, the tattoo, the buried past. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Rodriguez. He moved quiet but not like Parker. His silence wasn't poisonous, it was concerned. "They're closing in on you," he said softly, leaning against the hood of a Humvee. "Whispers in the barracks. Even some of the majors are starting to wonder. Parker's pushing hard." Emma didn't move. "Let him." Rodriguez frowned. "You don't care what they think." Her eyes lifted, steady. "I care about saving lives, not reputations." He studied her, then shook his head. "That's not going to be enough. If someone doesn't find the real mole soon, they'll pin it on you. You know that." Her silence was answer enough. Before dawn, the colonel summoned her. Hayes stood behind his desk, his face harder than stone, the weight of sleepless nights carved deep in his eyes. "There was another intercept last night," he said without preamble. "Enemy forces moved before we even left the wire. Someone is feeding them live updates." Emma's jaw clenched. Hayes' eyes narrowed. "And half this base thinks it's you." She didn't flinch. "Do you?" The silence stretched. Finally, Hayes exhaled heavy. "No, but my belief doesn't matter. Perception does. If this continues, Washington will come. And when they do, your past won't just be rumor. It'll be evidence. Emma's voice was flat. Then find the mole before they bury me for good. Hayes' gaze held hers. I'm trying, but I need time, and you don't have much left. The next mission came sooner than expected. A night patrol, simple route. Nothing unusual except for the tension coiling through every man who loaded onto the convoy. Emma drove again, her eyes flicking to every shadow, every curve of the road. Rodriguez rode shotgun, silent but steady. Parker rode 2 vehicles back, his gaze sharp in the mirrors, waiting for her to slip. Halfway through the pass, the radio crackled enemy movement ahead. But before the warning could finish, shots tore from the ridge. The convoy dove for cover, engines screaming, soldiers scattering into defensive positions. The ambush was too clean. Again, too perfect. Emma felt it in her bones. The mole had fed them this route too. She scanned the ridges, her mind cutting through chaos. And then movement, a flicker near the rear vehicle, not enemy, friendly. Parker. His radio pressed close, his voice low, frantic, not calling orders, calling coordinates. Her blood ran cold. The mole wasn't in the shadows, he was right behind her. Emma's rifle was in her hands before thought. She moved low, fast, cutting between cover, her breath steady despite the bullets hissing overhead. She caught him in the act, radio raised, coordinates spilling from his mouth. Enemy fire adjusted within seconds, hammering exactly where he'd called. Drop it, her voice cracked like thunder. Parker spun, eyes wide. Then the smirk returned, ugly in the gunfire's glow. Took you long enough. Rodriguez froze beside her, disbelief flooding his face. You, all this time. Parker's laugh was sharp, brittle. You think command cares about any of us. I made a choice. Better them than me. Better her than me. His eyes cut to Emma. Emma's voice was low, steady. You fed them my position. He shrugged, madness flickering in his eyes. And yet you're still standing. Maybe you're harder to kill than I thought. Rodriguez's rifle rose, fury twisting his voice. You sold us out. You killed our brothers. Parker sneered. And you think they'd believe you over me, over her. She's the ghost here, not me. The words were poison. And worse, they carried truth. Emma knew it. Parker's betrayal would damn her as much as him if she wasn't careful. But she didn't flinch, didn't falter. Her voice was calm, steel wrapped in quiet fire. You betrayed your oath, you betrayed them. That's the only truth that matters. For a moment time hung still. Bullets carved the air, smoke thickened, men shouted. But all Emma saw was Parker, the weight of his treachery hanging between them. And then he moved, rifle rising. Emma fired first. The shot echoed through the pass, sharper than all the rest. Parker crumpled, his smirk gone, his silence final. Rodriguez stared, breathing hard. Then he looked at her, eyes burning with both fury and relief. What now? Emma's voice was quiet, heavy. Now we survive, and we tell the truth, all of it. Together they pushed through the firefight, rallying the convoy, driving the enemy back with renewed fury. When the last shots faded, when silence finally returned, Parker's body lay among the dust and smoke. Back at base, the truth surfaced fast. His radio logs, his intercepted calls, proof carved in data undeniable. Parker had been the mole. The whispers died overnight. Suspicion shifted. And Emma stood in the center of it all, her past no longer hidden, her strength no longer invisible. Colonel Hayes found her in the quiet after, his face unreadable. You ended it, at a cost. Emma's eyes were steady. Truth always costs. Hayes nodded slowly. Washington will come. They'll want answers. They'll want to know why a ghost still walks among them. Her voice was soft, almost weary. Then let them, I'm done hiding. He studied her for a long moment, then finally, almost reluctantly, he smiled. Maybe it's time the world remembered what you carried, what you lost. Rodriguez stepped up beside her, his voice steady, loyal. She carried us. That's what matters. Emma's eyes flicked to the horizon, where the desert stretched endless, harsh, unforgiving. The place that had taken so much, but also given her a chance to save again. Her words came quiet but clear. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The wind swept across the base, carrying silence with it. And for the first time in years, Emma felt lighter. Not because the ghosts were gone, because she had finally stopped running from them.